The WRX STI was a focused, high-performance sports sedan that could be had for under 40 grand. It laughed in the face of refinement and emissions. That was until it died. The GR Corolla quickly stepped up to take its place, and it comes with a very similar goal.
If you enjoy fun, detailed car content without fluff, consider subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications. It may seem small, but it's pivotal for the channel to reach new heights.
This GR is actually mine. The STI would have been on my shortlist had they still been making it. When it was new, it cost about the same as the Toyota does now. Low mileage, clean examples without a funky history can still easily cost over $40,000. That makes this about as wallet-wrenching as a new GR Corolla with a little bit of markup. I tried and tried. The best deal that I could find remotely in my area was $2,000 over MSRP. Now, features are not the strong suits of either of these, but they're not exactly bare bones. So I'm going to be focusing on later model STIs, but with both of these here, you will have LED projector headlamps as standard. The Subarus are actually steering responsive, but the GR Corolla adds fog lights. While the circuit model GR Corollas will have small hood vents, none of them can match the big functional hood scoop of the STI that threatens lesser cars and small birds. I love that the STI added fluorescent painted brake calipers on the 2016 models and up. You will get larger rotors with the GR Corolla, but no Brembo clout like the Subie. Additionally, red brake calipers denote the performance package for the GR Corolla. I also like that the GR rides on 18-inch wheels, whereas you'll have 19s with a little less sidewall on the Subaru. Starting in 2020, the Subaru got proximity unlock and lock as standard, which will also come on every GR Corolla. Now let's talk wings. The STI comes with this as standard, or you could choose a more subtle option if you're mature. But with the GR, you actually have to get the Circuit Edition to get the outrageous spoiler, which I think is weird because it already has the giant wide body kit. Why not just add the spoiler that you already throw on like an XSE Corolla? The more exclusive Circuit and virtually non-existent Morizo will also have a forged carbon fiber roof. Now, when it comes to the aesthetics as a whole, I think the GR Corolla has a lot of wow factor. It's very fun, but my heart leans towards the STI. It just has more of a well-rounded rally car swagger, but this is all subjective, so let me know which one you think is the better looker.
Dimensionally, the STI is notably longer, but isn't as wide as the stout Toyota. Regardless, with the seats up, I've seen more accommodating hamster cages. At least it has underfloor cubbies that compensates a little for the poor cabin storage. Briefly, I'd like to thank the generous and knowledgeable people at Royal on the Eastside in Bloomington, Indiana that let me test drive this STI. Check them out and tell them thanks for me.
The cargo area is short in length. It also has a high load floor, probably due to the all-wheel drive and then the battery being moved to the rear. At least when you fold the seats down, you have a very flat space. The STI, though, will be wider and longer, so in terms of practicality, depending on what you're moving, the STI may actually be better for you. This car came out in 2015, so yes, it does feel dated by 2023 standards, but in many aspects that I think will be important to the type of person buying these cars, I think it's better. At least when comparing to the core grade Corolla, this has a little bit more zest to it. More red stitching, the red seat belts, the leather trim seats with the suede inserts that actually continue on the door panel as well. These are things that make it more distinct from the standard run-of-the-mill Impreza. Materials in here do feel very cheap, but they also feel very durable. There's actually a little bit of soft touch material right here where you probably end up bracing yourself while you're on the track because these seats don't hold you in super well, but they are reasonably comfortable. Now, you could get lumbar adjustment if you got the limited trim or the Recaro seat package. I'd definitely recommend that, but without them, this should still be comfortable enough for most road trips. The thigh support is lacking a little bit, especially if you're taller. I am 6'3" for reference, and I do have plenty of space, at least for both my knees and my head. Each model does come with heated seats and dual zone automatic climate control, a second info screen that seems kind of unnecessary, and really the tech here overall is definitely a low point, at least with the later model years, 2019 and above. You will have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, but outside of that, it's the bare basics. The system can be a little buggy, it's definitely slow. The resolution is just barely okay, but again, not the focus. I also wish that this had like a more updated steering wheel. The grip itself is nice, but this does look like straight out of 2011. Another selling point to this type of performance car is that it can have multiple purposes. So up front, we do have great storage. You do actually have a center console. And if you have some mild family hauling duties, if I'm in a comfortable position up front, I can still fit behind myself. My head does graze the roof, but legroom really isn't an issue, and I'll even have a center armrest. Comparatively, the interior of the GR Corolla is less spicy, but it does still hit the performance basics nicely, and it has much more modern amenities, just like you would expect. So this does feel very much like an LE Corolla. You have a lot of black plastics. There is some nice materials there on the dashboard, but there's not a whole lot to talk about. The key additions for the GR would be the fully digital gauge cluster that is highly configurable with a nice resolution, and it also comes with a fun, nicely stitched steering wheel with seats that hold you in just enough for spirited street driving without really compromising long distance comfort. Though lumbar adjustment is unavailable, I do think that thigh support here is a little bit better than the STI. And when it comes to features, this doesn't really pull too far ahead of the STI. So you can get things like a heated steering wheel and heated seats. That's an option. You can also get a JBL sound system that doesn't have a subwoofer, so it loses to the Harman Kardon sound system that you'll find in the Subie. It's also really not a whole lot better than the standard 6-speaker setup in the Corolla or the Rex. And that comes with a wireless charger that also does not work if your phone has a big camera bump, so just heads up. I do like that you have standard automatic climate control and standard wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. The infotainment system is also obviously much better. The response time is okay. The resolution is good. I like that it's just very straightforward. The user setup is pretty frustrating though. I think once we get past the more fresh look and features, the material quality is just a little bit worse than what's in the STI. And it also takes an L on storage, as you don't have an armrest, which seems like an odd omission. I actually don't mind it too much on long distance journeys, but some of you probably will. And the people in the back seat, well, they actually do get a center console, will have much less legroom.
And a little more headroom than the Subaru.
Neither of these will offer any console vents. If you can tolerate older tech and an older look, I honestly think that the STI's cabin is better for car enthusiasts than the GR, but any advantage the Subaru has disappears when you take it out on the road. Driving even a 2019 WRX STI feels just as nostalgic as you'd want it to be. Under the hood, you're going to have the EJ257 engine. It is tuned by STI. It makes 310 horsepower. Earlier model years actually made 305. That is hooked up to a very close ratio, 6-speed manual only. Unlike a lot of current Subaru 4-cylinders, this actually does do a pretty good job at pulling into the higher RPM range, but it is still very much dead in the lower RPMs.
And it does drop off hard at about 6,400 RPM, lending to it a peaky feel that's exaggerated by some turbo lag.
But I would say it has more character than the old WRX engine, and even the new one too. And it also has a completely different feeling clutch. It's pretty firm, kind of springy. It has a short take, and the shift throws are also kept pretty brief. For the STI, you can feel like an immediate difference in the throttle pedal when you switch from intelligent to sport sharp. And that's what we just did, because we're gonna see what this thing can do to 60. So we got 0 to 60 in 6.1 seconds.
That's a hair slower than what I got with the new WRX. Funny enough, other outlets report similar high 5 times in ideal conditions with the 2018 Plus STI. I think with a perfect launch and an earlier 1-2 shift, you could shave off a few tenths, but pre-refresh cars seem to be better tuned for flat out performance.
Once you get rolling, it feels a little bit faster than a WRX. But yeah, there's just more drivetrain shock than what you'll find in like the GR Corolla. There's a little bit of feedback through the clutch pedal. The shifter has a very nice connected mechanical feel to it, a little notchy. What is not ever going to be an issue here is traction. So this has a big leg up on basically any of its competitors, including the GR Corolla, because it has the driver-controlled center differential system from Subaru. But what does that actually mean? It is a full-time all-wheel drive system with a rear bias. It has a 41 to 59 torque split, and despite you being able to control that, it actually does have a mechanical limited slip differential in the center, and then there's a clutch pack attached to it that helps change that split. And then in the front, you're going to have a helical limited slip differential, and in the back, you're going to have a torsion limited slip. While it definitely still has a tendency to understeer, it works really well.
It has a strong hold on the road, and while it's not particularly great at rotating its weight, it pushes itself forward more like a rear drive car than the GR, and it stays remarkably flat through corners.
The stiff suspension doesn't get too flustered when hitting imperfections mid-corner. Everything seems to come together when you're driving this on a bad road fast. The car reacts to your steering inputs with a high level of eagerness because body roll is kept to a minimum. That's partially due to a firm suspension, but also to the lower center of gravity from the Boxer 4. There isn't as much steering feel coming through the wheel as I would want, and honestly, at times it feels a little vague, but I'm just so enamored with how capable it is. You get a little shift light there to remind you that the fun does need to stop. Oh, that sound is nice. It is properly quick. The steering is light, yet very precise. There's just something kind of missing. There is a floatiness to that front end that just doesn't give me, one, the ultimate levels of fun that I would like, and it doesn't match the confidence that I get from the suspension and the platform over any road. Still, an immensely capable car. These do work well out on the track. You just may want to upgrade the oil cooling. One thing I do really like are the Brembo brakes. They're not only good for track use, but they do have a firm, easy to modulate feel, and the pedal spacing is also very nice for heel-toe downshifting. The engine also does rev up very quickly, and there isn't any excessive rev hang. While I may not advise getting one if you're not gonna really take this out on some nicer roads, here on this abysmal Indiana back road, I'm actually kind of impressed. You're moving around with the road quite a bit, but these smaller imperfections aren't really bothering me.
And the medium-sized potholes and undulations do not break their way into the cabin. It just bounces over them. Hit something larger and it will rock your world.
And the ride isn't as busy as I was anticipating. It's still definitely firm. If you're, also thinking about like a Ford Focus RS, this is definitely more forgiving. Maybe even a little bit better than the GR. Getting up to highway speed, your highway cruising RPM, 65 miles per hour, 2,600 RPM range. Seeing out of the WRX is a high point. I mean, the dashboard is low, the window line is also very low. There's the giant wing there, but that doesn't really obtrude in your view of anything and just makes you feel cool. So as far as being an approachable car to drive, the powertrain can be kind of finicky, and I can see beginners really struggling with stalling the thing, but at least there is like a hill hold feature, so you're not completely left onto your own devices, but you will really need to get used to how the clutch bites. I think overall, the GR Corolla is much easier to drive. Now, I know a lot of the Subie bros are going to say I'm biased, but keep in mind, I grew up with the WRX STI. I idolized that car. The GR Corolla is just simply superior in 90% of ways, but in a car like this, personality matters the most, and that's where these two differ quite a bit.
One distinct difference is your outward view. You feel a little higher up in the cabin, and the dashboard is raised. The power plants are also completely unique.
So under the hood, we're going to have the G16 GTS, 1.6 liter turbocharged inline 3-cylinder. While some people may think that's wimpy, they haven't driven it because it puts out 300 horsepower and 273 pound-feet of torque, but honestly, those feel almost conservative. And this is also 200 pounds lighter than the WRX STI. This too is hooked up to a 6-speed manual that's a little bit less masculine feeling, just not as mechanically satisfying. I think the WRX STI feels more like a big lever that shuts down the power grid every time you operate it, whereas this is smooth. There's a small thunk as you enter each gate, and it's pretty easy to slip through the gears.
And the transmission gives you just enough vibrations and feedback to make it entertaining to use at any time. It's also geared aggressively to make use of that turbo engine that actually likes to rev to 7,000 RPM.
The clutch is also much lighter, more progressive, while still offering some pedal feedback. And it really helps you push the car without feeling like you're fighting the car. And it also helps this feel a lot quicker too. But let's see if the times make that official. And this is just a lot easier to launch for an all-wheel drive car than I was expecting, and it just snaps through those gears with a relative ease compared to the WRX. There's much less drivetrain shock, and even with shifting twice before 60, I just got there in 4.7 seconds. It is definitively quicker than the Subaru, even if you take out the shifting and the launching when you're already at speed.
No doubt the STI is the better tuner platform, but reliability always becomes a question when you begin modifying these things, especially if you're trying to make numbers that fully compensate for the narrow power band and clunky transmission to make it quicker than the GR.
And I also love the kind of offbeat inline six sound. And the Subaru also has its own kind of grumbly charisma. But if we're going by the numbers and the G-force feeling, the GR takes the W. The transmission also makes your life easier through auto rev matching, which defaults to off. A lot of people do complain that, oh, that is a turkey. Please do not hit my car. Please don't do it.
As driving Tyler gets distracted by the large bird, I should finish that thought by saying the rev matching feature is especially helpful because the pedals are far apart for heel-toe downshifting. However, after getting some more seat time, I don't have any issue with this anymore, and hardly use the rev matching, but it's a handy tool to make you feel more comfortable.
The all-wheel drive system in here is also interesting, but not as mechanically great as the STIs. So you will have a clutch pack operating in the center that can send up to 70% of torque to the rear wheels in its sport mode. It defaults to 60-40, but really when it comes to that rear number, it's saying that's the absolute most that it will send back there. Typically it's going to lean much more front bias, sometimes not even powering the rear wheels if it senses that it doesn't have to. You know, I've never driven this thing hard and felt like it was front wheel drive only. It has immense traction at all times, but the Subie definitely does have an advantage there.
With side-to-side transfer, the GR has Torsen limited slip front and rear diffs with the performance pack or circuit/Marizo specs. It claws its way through any corner, snow or shine. The ability to disconnect the rear also helps me get 30 miles per gallon without any fuss, which will save you a lot of money as these require premium.
You're not burdened with overwhelming amounts of turbo lag, and the 3-cylinder, even when you're not in boost, isn't too dead. Don't get me wrong, this has lag and you will feel it, and it definitely likes to be above 3,000 RPMs, but it's not as lethargic at low RPMs as I was anticipating. While it is fun to hoon in a straight line, it's even better around corners for various reasons, even compared to the STI. It's just a more playful car. The steering feels more connected, less vague, especially on center. You put it into its sport mode and it definitely stiffens up, firmer than what you'll get with the STI. Heel-toe downshifting, definitely have no issues there. I do have larger feet, so maybe that's why other people are getting into issues with it. I always forget how fast it is. It feels quicker than the WRX STI in most ways. The way that the turbo sounds is a little bit more pronounced. The brakes bite immediately. Body roll is present. It's not an overwhelming amount, especially when you're on road. Unless you're taking this to the track and you have stickier tires than what are on here, I think you'll be happy with this. Up at highway speeds, there's a decent amount of tire noise. It's about the same noise levels as what you'll get with the Subaru, but it is a bit loud. Highway revs are also about 2,600 at 65 miles per hour. The steering is precise. It's a little bit more sure of itself. It's easier to drive fast. And it also is quick to rotate. You can really use those brakes to get the rear end to come out, especially on track. There's more of a sense of balance. I also like that I can very easily pull up my oil temperature gauge. I think the Subaru does rev up a little bit faster. The steering and the lack of body roll also helps the car have just a little bit less latency, but that's not enough to make it feel more capable. I will say that the STI feels more planted though when you're throwing it around rougher corners, and that adds to the rough and tumble character of the Subaru. While you may get some pleasure out of this on a nice road, you're gonna have to pay for that on a bad road. It doesn't feel jittery, it doesn't waft over everything, and on smooth roads this feels nice. You feel more of the pavement beneath you than you do with the STI, in my opinion. So the flip side of that is that you also feel the smaller to medium-sized imperfections in here more than you would in the STI, but over the worst stuff, they're equally stiff. I would say this maybe isn't as bouncy, so it doesn't toss you around as much, but, and it surprises me to say this, if you want a slightly more isolated ride, the Subaru actually wins.
And to continue with the boring stuff, the GR comes with the full suite of Toyota active driving aids, and it all works very well. The STI at least offers blind spot monitoring. On a car like this, that's not usually a priority, but reliability is. I'm not going to get into this too much, but it shares a lot with the GR Yaris, a car that seems to have minimal problems. I have heard some complaints about the all-wheel drive system overheating in certain track situations, but heat wrapping the exhaust seems to alleviate most thermal issues. My only complaint is interior rattles. The STI did recently have a lawsuit for failing engines, but data on them is more so down to forums. And the general consensus there seems to be keep your maintenance religious and it will be fine. But this is no grocery getting Honda. Both of these have port injection, so carbon buildup isn't a problem, but the GR has direct injection too, giving it the best of both worlds. Overall, both of them seem like good options, but don't cheap out on maintenance. My final verdict here breaks the heart of my 12-year-old self. The Subaru is a capable car. It also comes with an all-wheel drive system that gives it a Gorilla Glue hold to the road. It's flat through corners, despite the suspension offering some degree of forgiveness. There's no denying it has a more aggressive cabin, a better backseat, debatably more practical trunk. And the EJ engine has character. If you are a ride or die Subaru fan, the STI won't disappoint until you drive a GR Corolla. Even if you modified the STI to make it as fast, it's still more clunky. Around the corners, the Subie can still hang, and the outright speed and grip is smile-inducing, but its vagueness compared to the GR becomes more apparent as the speed grows. The Toyota brings out giggles and urges you to drive faster. It rotates better too, and the powertrain's personality is more engaging and less abusive on city streets or when you've lost self-control on a back road. That's what a car like this is about: approachability, performance, and versatility. Yes, the GR cabin may earn shitbox status by today's standards, and the rear legroom could make contortionists complain, but there's a part of me that respects Toyota for taking a base Corolla and juicing the hell out of every performance component and saving none of the budget for anything else. It could have more cabin flair, but it reminds me of the Lancer Evo, or get this, the old STI. Without cars like those that perfected the formula for rally-bred compacts, I don't think this would exist. Which is why it's bittersweet for me to say that the GR outguns the Subaru in almost every aspect, and it's the car I'd recommend to most people. And that's also why I'm so pissed off that Toyota doesn't do something to stop these egregious markups from dealers like Subaru has. This almost ruins the value proposition that is so critical to a car like this, and it's even worse in Canada. But if you search hard enough, or you know a guy, it's possible to get one at a reasonable price in the US. If you're in love with the aggressive look inside and out, or the extra inches of rear legroom, the STI is a great option. It's easier to find and easier to modify, but otherwise, the Toyota is a no-brainer. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then leave a like and help me take on the YouTube algorithm. If you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. Follow me on Patreon for an additional podcast. I'll catch you in the next one.